Here's an example of a linear function application. In 2005, the average American spent 9 hours per week on the internet, and in 2010, this time had increased to 15 hours per week. Assume this trend is a linear relationship and let x be the year. Part A, find a function f that models the data given in the statement above. All right, to find a function, we have to dissect the data that's given. And if you look carefully, we're actually given, in essence, 2 points in the data set. We're given in this first part of the sentence that in 2005, the average American spent 9 hours per week on the internet. X is the year. The output would be the amount of time spent. So we actually have 1 point, 2005, 9, that tells us that links those 2 pieces of information together. We also have a second point that does this for a different point in time. 2010, the time spent was 15 hours per week. So here's a second point, 2010, 15. What we can do is use these 2 points to create, remember, a line. We want a linear relationship. To find any line, we need the slope. So the first step would be to find the slope of these 2 points. Remember, the slope is the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to start with the second point and go 15 minus 9, and then the x values would be 2010 minus 2005. Simplifying, I get 6 over 5, which we could also simplify because it comes out nicely to 1.2 if you prefer a decimal. To interpret this, think about how the numerator relates to hours of time spent on the internet, and the denominator relates to the time in years. So what this slope is really telling us is that because it's positive, that means that something is increasing. In particular, the hours on the internet are increasing by 1.2 hours per year. So every year that goes by, what this is saying is that Americans are spending on average 1.2 hours more on the internet. Once we have the slope, we could create an equation, linear equation, using what is commonly referred to as the point-slope formula. You'll see this in future classes as well, in particular calculus. So let's practice it here. What we want to do is enter in the slope and the point where we see y1 and x1. We can use either of these 2 points, your choice. Let's use the first one. Y minus, the y value is 9 in that point. The slope is 1.2. The x value in this particular point was 2005. To have this in function form, we want y isolated, so we're going to add the 9 to the back of this expression on the left. And this would actually be considered a function for this relationship. F of x equals 1.2 times x minus 2005, and then plus 9. Another alternate way of showing this equation is to distribute the 1.2 and add the 9 in by collecting like terms. So if we do that, we're going to get f of x equals 1.2 x minus 2397. Now remember, that's from distributing and collecting the 9, so make sure I'm leaving you to kind of do that calculation on your own. But these are 2 valid ways of showing the function. The reason I want to show both is that by collecting like terms, it makes this stage of the function makes it a little bit easier to work with if you're doing other things with the equation. But this first way of showing the equation is nice because it actually gives you extra information. It gives you the slope, and it actually retains that point that in 2005 there were 9 hours per week spent on the internet. So you retain a little bit of that information that came from this point originally. So there's usefulness in having either form of the equation of this function. Part B of this problem, based on the function found in Part A, in what year will the average number of hours spent per week on the internet be 25 hours? Well, our original function from Part A was f of x equals 1.2x minus 2397. Now, a little reminder of what this function is telling us. The input of the function was the year that we were in, and the output of the function was the hours spent on the internet per week. So when we go back and read this question again, it says in what year, so it's telling me to find X because I'm trying to find the year, will the average number of hours on the internet be 25? So basically my hours are 25. So I'm given the output of the function and I'm asked to find the input X. So we're trying to solve this equation. To solve this equation, we're just simply going to need to get constant terms on one side to isolate the variable. So when I move that negative 2397, I'm going to add it to both sides, and I'm going to get 2,422 equals 1.2x. I also want to get x by itself, so I'm going to need to divide by 1.2 that is multiplying x. When I do that, I get an approximate value of 2018.333 repeating, or 2018 and a third. So this gives me the year when I will have 25 hours on average being spent per week on the internet. So in about 2018, the average time spent per week on the internet will be 25 hours.